All right. Good morning, everyone. Really appreciate you being here. Okay. Um, Joni,
Yes,
take it,
ma'am.
take it
Good
away.
morning. Good morning. I have been in the business for over 20 years and just watched this webinar for the first time Thursday night and just became a bug maniac. Um, it's just a whole nother world that all of us garden geeks can play in. And most of us are aiming for a beautiful, bountiful garden, whether it's edible or ornamental. There are things that help us, and they're called bugs. There are things that don't help us so much, and they are pests. But just like in our world, they work together. And we have to learn to identify the good from the bad. And Suzanne Bontempo is just the creme de la creme to help us do that. This is a wonderfully info packed video, engaging, fun. She works for IPM, which is Integrated Pest Management. She owns Plant Harmony. She has more accolades than if I started now, we wouldn't have a video.
Stop
So
it.
I'm going to let her take over. Please enjoy her. I ended up taking notes even with all this stuff I had. And then I went out and peeked in my garden too. So sit back and enjoy this very entertaining time.
Thank you, Joni. You're so awesome. Joni is a star. All right. So, yes, thanks everyone for joining us. This is Gardening for the Good Bugs, and it's presented by Summer Winds Nursery in partnership with Our Water, Our World, which I am the program manager of. And I'm very excited to be here. So, we're going to go through slides for about 45 minutes. And as I mentioned, we will leave time at the end for questions. And what we're going to learn about today is who many of the good bugs are that we're going to find in our garden. Right after this program, we can go hunt and we're going to see some, new friends that I'm going to introduce you to. And then we're going to learn about how they are helping us and then how to keep them around. So I will ask anyone that has their, I just want to make sure everyone's going to stay muted throughout the program, please. And with that, okay, just was checking. So, all right. So Our Water World, just to quickly, I have to always give Our Water World a plug since this is what I do 24/7 pretty much is, this is an amazing program that I happen to be, have the pleasure of managing and working with a lot of amazing people. It's a national award-winning program. We partner with retailers such as Summer Winds and water pollution prevention agencies, and we provide integrated pest management education to the public. And what that means is we're helping you solve your pest problems with a less toxic approach. You might recognize our materials. These are fact sheets that you can find in a lot of the retailers throughout the Bay Area and the South Bay. And then you also notice these little shelf talkers that we put underneath eco-friendly products to help guide you to products that are going to be effective but won't impair our waterways, will not cause any harm to water quality, our environment, or our families or ourselves. So what IPM is a decision-making process that uses science-based strategies to solve pest problems. It allows us to look at the system as a whole. So in this case, it's going to be the garden, and it helps us identify what the problem is. So this is where things get tricky because a lot of times we might see a bug and think that's the culprit when in fact it's the beneficial insect eating the bad bugs and helping us out. So just that we're going to learn about that. But then from there, if it's a problem, is it a problem that we can live with? Do we know that it's going to just be very short-lived and kind of take care of itself? Or is it a problem that we actually have to take action? And if we do need to take action, we use a combination of actions, which is cultural controls, increasing the health of the garden, mechanical controls. These are the tools we use to manage the pests, like gopher baskets or deer fencing, or maybe sticky traps to help monitor when the pests are active. Biological controls are living organisms that help manage pests. We're going to learn a lot about them today. We're going to be focusing on beneficial insects. And then the chemical controls are the pesticides. We're always going to use these as a last resort. And we're always going to use eco-friendlies and less toxic whenever possible. All right. So IPM for beneficial insects. IPM for beneficial insects. It is identifying is the most important part of this equation. If we can't identify our bugs out there, our pests and our good bugs, then it's going to be really hard, and we can very easily make the mistake of accidentally getting rid of them. We're going to set our gardens up for success. We're going to grow biodiversity, and then we're going to reduce and eliminate pesticide usage. So we're going to start with a little game, and this should be really fun. All right. This is going to be fun. We're going to test your knowledge. It's very short. So first we're going to have a practice session. I'd like everyone to find the raised hand button at the bottom of the screen between chat and Q&A, and raise your hand. Ah, yes, right on. Okay, now click again to lower your hand. Beautiful. Okay, great. I love it. So we all feel good about the raised hand button and then lowering our hand. Yay. Okay, this is awesome. All right, so let's get started. So you see this critter in the garden. Are we going to squish it or not squish it? If we're going to squish it, raise your hand. Squish this weird looking bug. We're going to squish it? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Awesome. I know, it's really freaky. I might have nightmares about this one. All right. Okay, wonderful. Okay, everyone can lower their hands. Now we're going to go to this one. We see this one in the garden. Oh my gosh. Are we going to squish this one? Raise your hand if we squish it. Raise your hand. Oh my gosh. I know. I'm so freaked out. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Everyone lower your hands. This is so fun. I love it. All right. Okay. This one. We see this one in the garden. Ugh. Are we going to squish this one? Raise your hand if we squish it. Raise our hand. Oh my gosh. I know, it's so gross. Oh my gosh. All right. Okay, we can lower our hands. We got, I think it's just one more. It might be two more. I don't even remember, to be honest. Okay. Oh my gosh, we see this one. Do we squish this one? I know. This one's really freaky. All right. All righty. So guess what? They were all good bugs. Can you believe it? Those were all good bugs. So let's meet our friends. Okay, so we all know who this one is, right? This is the star of the show. We pretty much get excited when we go to the garden. We definitely can recognize this is our lady beetle, aka ladybug. There's over 450 species of ladybugs or lady beetles in North America, and they're going to vary in colors and in spot patterns. So we might see them as all black with like 2 red dots, or we might have red or kind of an orangish red, and it could be lots of little black dots, or maybe just 9 or 7 or 4. They come in gray, even kind of a khaki color. But the ladybugs are predators of small, soft-bodied insects. So that includes aphids, whitefly nymphs, scale insects. And both the adult and the larva have voracious appetites and can consume many aphids as well as the other insects. In fact, they can eat over 5,000 during their lifespan. So understand that we can bring them into our garden, introduce them. We can purchase them at Summer Winds. But if we don't have food in the garden, they're going to definitely be on the search looking for food. So here's the thing. It's really important to not wipe out all the aphids, to have a little bit of tolerance and understand that the aphids and other insects might look really gross and icky, but if we got these bugs, let me tell you, ladybugs are going to come and find them. So what I understand is that it's been documented that if we have a perimeter of buckwheat around the garden, then I understand they won't migrate past that. I've never had that personal experience, but it is documented. And that's something else to understand is that we want to provide a nice habitat for these insects. We want to grow diversity of flowering plants, and that's going to include trees and shrubs. So to have a tree or two in the garden is going to be nice. To have some shrubs is going to be nice, but more importantly, to have a variety of flowering plants. And then also to have sections of your garden where we have like a chunky mulch and maybe even some branches laying on the ground that may be like line a path or something. And the reason why is because they use the chunky mulch and the branches as a habitat, a nesting area. All right, so remember this one? This is our ladybug larva. I know, looks crazy. They are very tiny. They look like little alligators. They're really, I don't think they're really going to be much larger. They're smaller than a half an inch, maybe about a third of an inch. And they do vary in color, just like the adults do. Sometimes they're all black. Sometimes they're really, really dark gray. And they could have a combination of like orange or reddish orange or even gray, lighter gray, like splotches or stripes. The larva will stay in this form for a couple of weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, the whole time just looking for food to eat. They really are just looking for that protein diet, and they can consume hundreds of aphids and other soft-bodied insects. So that's going to include scale insects, spider mites, and small insect eggs. So they're really out there cruising around. Just their whole purpose is just to eat pest insects. And then these, have you ever seen these around? These are the lady beetle pupas. So when they go from and you see up in that corner, I have the arrow. That is the ladybug larva just starting to transition from bug larva to lady beetle. And you see all of these little kind of dome shaped weirdos. I mean, they just look really strange, right? Like aliens. They're going to stay in this form from anywhere of 5 to 15 days, and then they'll emerge as the adult lady beetle. So it's kind of cool. They're going to be like on leaves, or in this case, I just discovered this yesterday. I mean, there's it's a bonanza. There's something like 8 on that. It's a bamboo stake that I had laying on the ground, and they found a nice home there to just go through their transition. I've even seen them on a fence or the side of a raised bed. So have a look. You'll see them around, and know that in a few days, or maybe about a week or so, it's going to emerge as an adult lady beetle. And these are the eggs. These are the eggs, and you're going to see these around the garden. They're the adult lady beetle. She's going to lay eggs in these clusters of anywhere from 5 to 30. They look like this golden yellow football that's up on its end, and they're going to be around. It takes about 3 to 5 days for these eggs to hatch. And through the spring and summer, one single female adult lady beetle can lay 1,000 eggs. So it's pretty fantastic. I got to share. I've got them all over the garden right now. I started to cut back my fava beans from my, as the winter cover crop. And I just started to notice that they are all over underneath the leaves, just, about 20 different, clusters. It was really amazing. All right. So now, does anybody recognize this insect? This is our green lacewing. Green lacewing we might recognize as flying around the porch light at night. It is, very small, really pretty, very delicate. They are going to be nectar and pollen feeders. They're really just out there feeding on the nectar and the flower pollen, but they also feed on the honeydew, the sticky secretion that aphids and other soft body insects eat. So you'll see them around the plants that aphids are, where we find aphids, which is a good thing, because Do we know? Remember this one? Remember this really scary, weird dinosaur looking insect? This is the lacewing larva. His nickname is aphid lion. Okay, so these little guys are tiny, 3/8 of an inch, which is a millimeter, and they could grow all the way up to half an inch, though I've never seen them that large. They're very, very tiny. In fact, you might think that you would not see them in the garden. They're so small. They're about the length sometimes of just two aphids, but they're really cool. They've got these spikes on their back and these piercing mouth parts, and they have extremely carnivorous appetites. They just want to consume insects, and they can eat them at about the rate of one per minute. They are going to eat a very broad section, very wide variety of insects, including aphids, thrips, mealybugs, whitefly nymphs, small caterpillars, insect eggs, and other soft-bodied insects. And this is really fun. When I started to do research for this program years ago, I read a paper, I think it was at University of Purdue, where they studied these little lacewing larvae, and they noticed that they would go in, eat a couple aphids, hollow them out, take the outside like shell, so to speak, of the aphid, throw it on its back as a decoy to come in to eat more aphids. Isn't that remarkable? I just can't, it's just a trip. It's a trip. Anyway, they can eat hundreds of insects through their 2 to 3 week larval stage. So they're in this stage for about 2 to 3 weeks, and really just eating hundreds of insects. So it's really wonderful. When I see lacewings growing, flying around my garden, I get really excited, because then I'm looking for this. These are the lacewing eggs, and they're always going to be on these little stalks. And the reason why is because, and they're tiny, and they're kind of creamy white, maybe pale green. They're about the size. Let me see. Do I have the size? I don't have the size on here, but they're going to be really, really tiny. And almost, you'd almost think you wouldn't see them, but if you look a little closer, you see these little eggs on a stalk. You know they're lacewing eggs. And the reason why they're on a stalk is because if they were all lined up next to each other, just like those ladybug eggs, the first one that would hatch would eat all the other eggs. So the lacewing adults are smart. The female knows she's got to put these eggs up on a little stalk so that she can allow her populations to continue. And so the minute that egg hatches, the lacewing larva will climb down that stalk and immediately start eating. All right. And here's another picture. I was at a botanical garden north, and we were on a bug hunt, and we saw, this is the black ladybug larva. So you see it's all black. It doesn't have any coloring. So this is one of the colors you might see it in, and see how tiny it is. And then there is the lacewing egg. Isn't that cool? All right. This might be one of my most favorites. This is our syrphid fly or hoverfly. And we're going to see them in the garden cruising around. A lot of times they're mistaken as bees or wasps. However, they are a true fly. So they do not have a stinger, and they are not a bee or a wasp. But they do have stripes, and they come in a number of different sizes. So they either can be kind of medium small to really small. And they are a true fly, and they are going to dart around the garden like a helicopter. So you might notice them, they'll like dart around, and they'll go zzz and stop, and then they'll like hover, and then they'll fly around and dart over here and stop and hover, just like a helicopter. And they love pollen and nectar, and they are just out there helping us pollinate our flowers. Their most favorite flower is sweet alyssum, but I'm going to share they also love yarrow, as pictured here. And they absolutely love cilantro flowers, parsley flowers, really anything that is a cluster of little flowers. So I'm going to be honest, I grow my cilantro now. You know how fast it bolts? Sometimes we just get so disappointed because we barely got any cilantro. But now I just see that at the cilantro leaves as a bonus. I am planting cilantro strictly for my beneficial insects, because when it goes to flower, you're going to see them swarming it. It's so fun. All right. And this weird little worm-like organism that we all wanted to squish was the syrphid fly larva. And do you see them there on that rose in between all those aphids? So here is the thing, because that hoverfly is a true fly, this is that word we don't really like to use, maggot. I know it's not a really good word. It's not attractive. However, it is going to vary in color from like a light pale green. Here, this is kind of a limey green color, all the way to kind of a tan or khaki color. They're always going to have that racing stripe down their back. Sometimes they're even a little bit more translucent. So they might look even a little bit grayish, but they're small. They're going to be 1/32 of an inch, which is a millimeter, all the way up to a half an inch, depending on the variety, depending on the developmental stage of the insect as well as the species. Because as I mentioned, the adults can range in sizes too, depending on the species. So will the larva. And they're going to prey on aphids, scale insects, thrips, and mites. They really love aphids. And I will share that they can eat hundreds of aphids and other soft-bodied insects during their life as this larva. Here's another picture. So it's really fun to go out. If you've got some aphids on your roses, the roses are really starting to pop right now, and they might have some aphids on it. And before you go for that spray, even insecticidal soap can actually kill off these larvae. Take a look, have a closer look and see, do you see any of these little larvae on there? Because they're actually going to take care of the population of aphids for you. And here are the eggs. The eggs are going to look like little tiny grains of rice. They're going to typically be just uh, uh, laid singly, usually around a cluster of aphids. And when we see this, just know they're going to hatch in just a couple of days. The whole life cycle of the syrphid fly or hoverfly is just 2 to 4 weeks, so it is very short. But again, have a look and plant flowering plants like sweet alyssum, catmint or nepeta. They love the buckwheat flowers, cilantro, parsley, dill, and other tiny, tiny flowers. So check that out and attract them to your garden. Now, okay, remember this one. This is a mealybug destroyer. How many of you have mealybugs on your succulents or on any of your plants outside? Mealybugs are really a nightmare. The minute I see them, I freak out because they're very difficult to manage. However, what I've learned, because this is something that's new to me, that these guys are out there taking care of the mealybugs for us, and they do a pretty darn good job. So the adult is very, very tiny. The adult is just 1/6 of an inch. So it's very, very small. Whereas the larva is going to be about 1/2 an inch, which is twice the size of an adult mealybug. So something I can share is both of them are extremely fast. They move around with a lot of speed, and all they want to do is consume mealybugs. They will also eat scale insects. And if scale insects are not around, if mealybugs are not around, they'll eat aphids. They'll eat spider mites, thrips, whitefly nymphs, okay? But they really love mealybugs, and they can eat hundreds. Their life cycle is just 2 months, and during that 2 months, they are just gobbling up mealybugs like popcorn. The larva looks a lot like a mealybug, as you can see, and this is so that they could sneak up on the mealybugs and and consume them. Unfortunately, because they look so similar to mealybugs, they often are not noticed and usually targeted as a pest and killed off because of pesticides, because we don't see them, we don't recognize them, we don't notice them because they look so similar, and we're just trying to kill those mealybugs, so we sadly kill them too. So the next time you go, you see some mealybugs in your plants, have a closer look, because they really are going to look slightly different, and they're going to be twice as big as the mealybugs themselves. All right. Isn't that fun? Okay. Has anybody seen this before? This is a type of parasitic wasp egg. That's a different type of parasitic wasp. And parasitic wasps are really cool. They are wasps that live part of their life inside other insects as a parasite or on top of the insect. So those are eggs that are on their host insect. There are several hundred different species of these parasitic wasps. And not to be too freaked out, they're extremely tiny. They're very small to minuscule because for instance, you've got an aphid, they're piercing the aphid and laying their egg inside the aphid. That's got to be tiny. And then when that egg hatches, they will eat the inside of that aphid, and then they're going to emerge as an adult. So they're very, very tiny. Oftentimes, they are also swarming the cilantro and parsley flowers, but we're not even recognizing them as parasitic wasps. They're not going to sting us. They're not going to swarm us. They want nothing to do with us. Their whole purpose is to lay eggs on a host insect, and that's it. So they're very helpful in controlling aphids, scale insects, leaf hoppers, caterpillars, cockroaches, flies, beetles, white flies, and even ticks. So, and they're going to range in color from black to dark brown. So check them out. This is super cool. So I was working at a nursery one day, just doing some, outreach, talking to customers and helping people, answering their questions. And one of the associates came over to show me a customer had come in with these camellia leaves in a Ziploc bag, and they were freaked out. They're like, what the heck is this? And we got really excited. So of course that person thought we were cuckoo. We got really excited because we knew it was aphid mummies. So when we have aphids on our plants, it's always nice to take a closer look. And now this is a lot. Typically we don't see this many, but what this is that parasitic wasp lays its eggs inside that aphid. The egg hatches, it will clean out the inside of the shell, so to speak, and then it emerges, it cuts this perfectly round circle. So, and that's how it emerges as an adult. So if you see these aphids, look a little closer and see if you see any that look like puffed, almost like puffed rice with a perfect exit hole. That's going to be your indicator that you've got parasitic wasps, and just let them take care of it. It's hard to convince someone that they're actually going to be way more effective and efficient in managing the pests than a pesticide, but you can trust us. Look at this wonderful job they did on this camellia. There were no live aphids here. It was only aphid mummies. All right. This might also be one of my favorites. Well, actually, they're all my favorites, but the soldier beetle, we start to see them very early in the spring. They're typically the first out. They're going to be a little larger, about a half an inch. They are in the same family as lightning bugs or fireflies, but they don't have that light producing organism, or that organ. So they just are cruising around, and they're feeding off of flower nectar and pollen, also the honeydew secretions of other insects. And they also will eat some insects. They'll eat small caterpillars, caterpillar eggs, aphids and stuff. They just kind of cruise around and do a little bit of everything. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. I didn't have a picture. And then the larva of the soldier beetles are in the ground. And they are going to also look similar to the ladybug larva. They look like small alligators. We typically don't see them because they're in the ground, and they're feeding off of ground dwelling insects that are a problem. So the larva is taking care of the pests in the ground, while the adult is taking care of the pests above ground. All right. Let me see, was there anything else? I have to follow my notes because there's so much information to share. All right. So now we talk about our friend, the dragonfly. And I like to, I feel like a lot of times we forget about how important dragonflies are. So I just like to give them a little bit of a shout out, because dragonflies are really important. And because we live here in California, we're surrounded by a lot of areas where the dragonflies will, make their homes, which is going to be marshy areas, ponds, lakes, creeks, things like that. And they're going to lay their eggs. Their eggs are very, very tiny. Typically, if you just make a little dot with your ballpoint pen or pencil, that's how small the eggs are. And they're typically, the adult dragonfly will just release eggs on top of the water or in marshy areas where there's some vegetation for those eggs to kind of cling to, or even in the muddy creek bottoms. That's where we'll see the eggs. And let's see, they will hatch and live as a nymph in the water for up to 2 years, and then they'll emerge as an adult dragonfly. As an adult dragonfly, they will eat hundreds of flying insects like fungus gnats, mosquitoes, and other flies. Their feeding range is going to be about 3 miles. So they will fly out and hunt about 3 miles from their home, which is pretty fantastic. But I can share something that it's really important for us to reduce our pesticide usage, especially the problem pesticides is what I'm speaking to, not the eco-friendlies, because the problem pesticides or the non-eco-friendly pesticides they inevitably find their way into the waterways, polluting them and impacting our dragonflies and killing the nymphs. Now, products like mosquito dunks, mosquito bits, the beneficial bacteria we use that to manage and kill the mosquito larvae, those products are only targeting the mosquito nymphs, not ladybug, I'm sorry, not dragonfly larvae. So please continue using your mosquito dunks, your mosquito bits, and products that are the beneficial bacteria, because they are not harming anything other than those mosquito larvae. All right. And I'm sorry for those of you that are freaked out by spiders. I try to pick really cute pictures. The crab spiders are, or common garden spiders are, those are photos I've taken of my garden. They're just, I love them. They're my most favorite. I see them, I get really excited. They're not ever happy to see me. They get really scared and they try to back in and hide. But understand there's only a small population, a small percentage of spiders that are web weavers. Most of the spiders are actually not web weavers. They're actually going to be on the ground, the base of plants, or in the flowers, like hiding in the petals, waiting to ambush their prey. So yeah, they're super cool. Let's see. There's over, for crab spiders, just because I love them so much, there's over 200 different species in North America. So kind of fun. But they're actively hunting throughout the day. And check them out. And again, they're not interested in us. They just want to consume food. So let me share something. Spiders, so far of all the beneficial insects we've looked at today, they are the most important. They are the most beneficial. They are eating insects and other arthropods and such at very large rates. If we were to gather up, and spiders are on every continent, so they're across the world the most beneficial, because if we gather up all the food that all the spiders have eaten in a year, it'll equal the weight of 50 million people. So though I don't like spiders in the house, and let me tell you, when it comes to be fall and we have to walk through our gardens and we have to go like this to not get our faces in a web, I have some tolerance. I've learned, because they're eating other insects that are less desirable, I will let them exist with a greater level of tolerance than I ever did. All right, what the heck is this? These are beneficial nematodes. These are microscopic worm-like organisms that naturally live in the soil. We would never see them unless we took a soil sample and got a very good microscope to look at them. We can purchase them. These are wonderful. There's a couple different species of nematodes, and they are strictly feeding off of soil-dwelling organisms, such as fungus gnat larvae, grubs, other beetle larvae, cucumber beetle larvae, vegetable leaf miner larvae, thrips pupa, cabbage moths, the larvae, anything that has a part of their life cycle in the ground that's a pest, they're going to be feeding off of. So it's great. This is a perfect time of year to inoculate our soils with the beneficial nematodes, and they're going to take care of. In fact, I'm going to do that later today. The cucumber beetle, that is a problem in my garden. I'm going to inoculate the soils today. It's a perfect day, and they're going to eat all the larvae that's in the soil to reduce my cucumber beetle populations. Here is a picture of a nematode attacking a fungus gnat larvae. Look at them. See, so fungus gnat larvae, you can imagine how tiny it is because we know how tiny fungus gnats are, but then those nematodes are even way smaller. So totally a trip, isn't it? All right. Okay. And then, of course, we have our bees and other pollinators. So we all are very familiar with the European honeybee. We recognize it. It's out there buzzing around, doing a lot of work. But there are so many other native bees in our garden. And last year at this time, when we were sheltering in place and I was spending more time in my garden, I was starting to see and notice that I had native bees. There's over 4,000 species of native bees in North America. And throughout the Bay Area, we have approximately 1,600 native bees. That's a lot of native bees. 30% of the native bees are going to be tunnel nesters, which means they're going to nest in like reeds or like bamboo canes or like a bee block that we might make or purchase. You might find them at Summer Winds. Some type of a bee nesting block is where these 30% of the bees are going to nest. Whereas 70% are ground dwellers and ground nesters. And we're going to see them taking home in like abandoned ground beetle tunnels and things like that. So when we lay out that mulch in our garden to reduce water evaporation and to save water, which is so important. Mulch is amazing, but we want to leave sections of the garden, especially sections that might have a nice area where we have a lot of perennials that are growing and really have filled in a spot. We can actually leave areas of our garden raw without mulch and uncultivated, where we're not digging in the soil and stuff, so that we can actually invite our native ground dwellers. So just keep that in mind. And here we are. Here's our friends right here. We want to invite the beneficials. And how do we do that? We look at flowers. So what do these flowers have in common? So a lot of us might say, oh, they're brightly colored. Yes, because even white is considered a bright color in our garden. So keep that in mind. And but something else they have in common is that they are clusters of tiny flowers. Now, we might look at that Gaillardia or that Erigeron or that Cosmo or even this aster in my screen. We might see this as a single flower, but what this is that those are petals. Those petals are rays that are attracting the insects. And the middle, that button in the middle, that's actually hundreds of tiny little flowers. And those hundreds of tiny little flowers are actually attracting the beneficial insects. And they're able to get their pollen and their nectar from those tiny flowers. Now, we also see clusters of flowers like the alyssum or the yarrow. These are also going to be clusters of even tinier flowers that have petals and then the little flowers in the middle. And so this is really what we want to do is, in addition to all of our other flowers that we have in the garden, we want to have a nice collection and a diversity of tiny flowers. So flowers that look like a daisy or a sunflower, such as Erigeron, cosmos, asters, and so forth, or flowers that look like, that grow in clusters of tiny flowers. So like the yarrow, the ceanothus, agastaches, mint, parsley, the cilantro. Remember that I said that was one of my favorites. When we plant these flowers, the beneficial insects come. I just got to trust me. And if you're just feeling like I've planted these flowers and I've got, pest insects, I've got aphids, but I don't see any beneficial insects. So what you can do, this is a fun trick. You get 1 tablespoon of sugar mixed with 1 cup of water. And instead of spraying the pesticide, spray the sugar water on your plants because it's going to definitely attract the ladybugs and the lacewings for sure because they love that sugary, sticky substance, the secretions that the aphids make. So it's going to be bait for them. It's going to invite them. So just check that out. And I know that we gave you all a handout that has a list of some of these plants. We also have provided you with the Healthy Gardens fact sheet that you can find on the Our Water, Our World website, as well as the 10 most wanted. I believe Shelly has emailed everybody the PDF of these. But you can also go to the UC Master Gardeners website. Typically, there is going to be a list of flowering plants that attract beneficial insects and pollinators, as well as the California Native Plant Society. And I believe that Shelly is also giving everyone the Pester Pal Activity Guide PDF, but you can also find it on the Our Water, Our World website. This is a wonderful activity guide for our kids that really get them engaged in the garden and learning about all the good bugs that we are talking about today. And then beyond our beneficial insects, we've got more garden allies. Birds, 90% of birds at some point in their life feed on insects. And in fact, around the world, birds will eat 400 to 500 metric tons of beetles, flies, ants, moths, aphids, grasshoppers, crickets, and other arthropods each year. They're doing a tremendous job at keeping pest insects under control. Frogs, this guy I found in my green bean teepee. He was in there feeding off of aphids, slugs, and snails. And they'll also eat worms. And who else is he eating? Oh, lots of small critters, little beetles, things like that. So the frogs are also really fantastic. And bats, we don't really think about bats very often because they're coming out at night. They're also a little freaky for us. Maybe some of us are afraid of bats, but there's currently around 16 different native species of bats throughout the Bay Area. They will roost in a variety of places depending on their species. They're insectivores, means they're just out there hunting for insects. They do an amazing job feeding on moths, flying insects, like mosquitoes and so forth. So they are actually really good news for us gardeners. Yeah, yeah. Small insects, moths, and mosquitoes are great. And then the lizards. Oh my gosh, Western fence lizard. How many of you have the Western fence lizard in your garden? The Western fence lizard is amazing, right? Yeah. Did you all know that not only are the Western fence lizards eating other small insects, but like beetles, mosquitoes, and other variety of spiders? They eat spiders and grasshoppers and such. But when ticks come to get a blood meal off the lizard, there is a special enzyme. Some scientists over at UC Berkeley discovered that there's an enzyme in the Western fence lizard that neutralizes that Lyme's disease bacteria. So when ticks feed on the Western fence lizard, it is neutralizing the Lyme's disease. Isn't that a trip? That's why the West Coast has doesn't have the Lyme's disease as much as they do in other parts of the states. All right. So let's now talk about setting our gardens up for success, because isn't that what we want to do, right? So when we garden for good bugs, we want to plant a variety of flowering trees, shrubs, and perennials. We want to offer a water source because what I've learned is that our little insects get thirsty too. And this was when we had our dry conditions about 5-7 years ago. What I discovered when I was working as an educator at this public education garden in San Francisco, it's a registered CSA, and we had prepared a box for harvest, and we're washing the produce at the outdoor sink, and there was a sponge, and I noticed that a bee from the beehive came over and picked up a bead of water. It literally picked up a bead of water, which was remarkable to see. it was amazing to witness. But then I realized that, oh yeah, the insects are going to be thirsty too. So what's really important is to have, I just put out a glazed saucer. I have an extra glazed saucer in my collection. I put some pebbles in there. I just get pebbles from, like a retailer like Summer Winds. You want to avoid gathering any pebbles from the beach because they could be really high and salty. Well, so we just get some glazed pebbles or some washed pebbles, and we put them in the glazed saucer, and we fill the water level up about halfway. And the reason why we have the pebbles there is so that the pollinators and our butterflies and other beneficial insects can land on those pebbles and access the water without drowning. And then, every day or so, I'm rinsing that out because, of course, we don't want to invite mosquitoes, although that water typically evaporates out pretty quickly. Then we want to let some of the flowers go to seed. We're going to, deadhead and maintain our perennials through their blooming season. But then at the end of that blooming season, I typically stop deadheading. I let the plants go to seed. And the reason why is because a lot of birds enjoy these seeds, but then they also use a lot of the materials as for their nests, such as the Japanese anemones and the clematis. Remember how they get those kind of cottony little woven things? They use that material for their nests. And then we want to have a chunky arbor mulch in areas of the garden. So I know at Summer Winds, they sell a bark chip that's like 1/2 inch to 1 inch. That's perfect. Now, not the entire garden doesn't need to be covered in that size. You can also use the smaller, like the 1/4 inch, the micro bark. But if we have a section of the garden that has the larger chunky bark, it not only is it going to benefit the beneficial insects, it's also going to be a barrier from slugs and snails because they are not able to cross that chunky wood chip. And then, as I mentioned before, we want to leave a section of the garden raw and natural and not cultivated for our ground nesting bees. And then from there, we really want to look at reducing and avoiding pesticides. Even eco-friendly products, when they are applied while they're still wet, are going to kill off the beneficials. So I'm talking about neem, I'm talking about insecticidal soap, I'm talking about the horticulture oils, all of them. The beneficial insects are not, resistant to pesticides. So when we use pesticides, because sometimes we need to, right? And these are called chemical controls, we're going to always use as a last resort. We're going to know the pest and only target that pest. So that's something to share. If we've got aphids on our roses and we don't see any beneficial insects and we want to, eliminate those aphids, we can spray insecticidal soap. We can spray insecticidal soap and kill those aphids. But understand that those aphids are not going to get on anything else. We don't need to spray the entire garden. Aphids, again, there's like 400 different species of aphids throughout the Bay Area. They all are a different color and they all have their own specific name and they like their own specific plant. So they're very selective of the plants that they like to feast on. So like for instance, the black aphids love my fava beans, and my fava bean plants right now are just covered with the black aphids. That limey green aphid loves the roses. That kind of orangey aphid loves the asclepias and so forth. So just know that the pests typically are only on their host plant. All right, we're going to spot apply. We're not going to spray the entire garden as I just shared. We're always going to use less toxic and eco-friendly. And what makes these less toxic and eco-friendly is that they don't have residuals that linger. So a couple things to keep in mind: as soon as these products are dry on the plant, other insects like beneficial insects, our children can touch those plants, pets can touch those plants. They're not going to be toxic to the, there's not going to be residuals that are going to get on to the beneficial insects or our pets or our children or us. And they typically break down pretty quickly. So usually they have residuals on that plant. Their function is going to last anywhere from 5 to 7 days, and that's about it. So we always want to spray at the end of the day, and that's usually around sundown or dusk. So to understand that most of the beneficial insects are less active at that time and our pollinators are back in their hives. We want to avoid spraying trees when they're in bloom. And we really want to understand the consequences of our actions. And really very important is we want to look out for products that contain neonicotinoids. These are going to be pesticides that act as a systemic that will move through all parts of that plant, including the pollen and the nectar. And when beneficial insects feed on that pollen and nectar, including our bees and other native bees, they are also going to be killed by these products. To learn more about pesticides and how they impact our beneficial insects and bees, or to learn how to find pesticides that are going to be less toxic and more bee friendly, there's this really awesome website on the UCIPM website, which is the Bee Precaution Pesticide Rating. So check this out. And then something I like to share is that when we are in the garden and we do see some bugs, we really want to properly identify them. Because when we have pests, it's really easy to misidentify. So we want to first properly identify the pest, because if we can't identify it, we are not going to be able to solve that problem. We're not going to be able to manage that pest. We also want to understand the life cycle of that pest, because sometimes the life cycle is very short. You know, for instance, like the spittle bugs right now, it looks like someone spit on your plants. But that's a little leafhopper in there. They make the like kind of bubblies for their eggs to be protected. They typically only last 2 weeks, and usually I can just blast them with water and they're done. So really, we want to understand the pest and understand the life cycle, understand the habitat and the timing. And then we want to look for our beneficial insects. Are the natural enemies present? So I'm going to go through a couple of bugs right here, or a couple of things that show you how easy it is to misidentify. So here we have our mealy bug destroyer that feeds on mealy bugs. And then we've got a flea beetle. They're both really tiny. They both really look very similar, but the mealy bug destroyer is a good bug and the flea beetle is a bad bug. And then here we are, we have our cucumber beetle, which is a pest in most gardens. And then we have a mildew eating ladybug that looks very unusual. Here we have a bad bug, here we have a good bug. And then here we are with our damsel bug, which preys on a wide variety of small insects. And then we have a leaf-footed bug that's a pest for tomatoes and pomegranates. Good bug, bad bug. And look how similar they look. So when we're in the garden, when we see some pests, a couple things you can do. We can reference the UCIPM website. This is an amazing library of information for us. So if I've got a plant, remember I said most pests are plant specific. So if I've got like my plum tree, and I see bugs in my plum tree and I don't know what it is, I'm going to go to UCIPM. I'm going to type plum inside the search bar, and I'm going to see the whole list of all the insects and diseases it gets. And it's going to be my process of elimination to do a little research. You can also go to the Our Water, Our World website and check out the catalog of fact sheets we have. That is not going to be as extensive as as UCIPM, but it's going to be really helpful. And then on the UCIPM website, there's also these cool things like quick tips for beneficial predators and ladybugs and other lady beetles. And another really cool resource that I have personally used, it's really fun, is bugguide.net. So if you've got a bug in the garden that you have no idea what it is and you can't find it anywhere on like all the research you're doing, then you can go here and you can email them, upload a photo of the bug, and they will identify it for you. And then the National Pesticide Information Center, not only is this an amazing resource for understanding how pesticides work, and I'm talking about the active ingredients, not the brand name, but we also have this awesome natural enemies quick list. So I invite you to also check this out. This is a really wonderful website that gives us a lot of great information. So in close, I'd just like to share, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. Everything is connected. Here is my little syrphid fly friend on my thumb. That's what I said. This is my most favorite. He follows me everywhere I go. I have a syrphid fly by my side. It is so much fun. I can't thank you enough for joining us today. We are going to finish with your questions. I hope that I have sparked a new interest and helped you see your garden through a new lens of getting outside, exploring, and looking at the good bugs in the garden. All right, Joni, can you unmute? Oh, there you go. Hi, Joni.
Hi, sweetie. That was wonderful. I learned even more than the first time, or maybe I just retained more. But I'm really happy that so many people weighed in with questions. Some came early in the presentation, and I think were answered. I can revisit some of those just in case. There was a suggestion which I thought was really good of possibly putting something in a picture with the big bug pictures to get it more to scale, as far as for people to have some kind of point of reference to how small the larvae truly were or the bug really was. I thought that was a good idea. I think some good idea. Pictures later showed it a little more. And then one of our viewers included a suggestion that you keep a magnifying glass in your toolbox, which is also cool. Yes. As you're going through your garden. So a couple of the questions, if you have a moment. You did answer this, but maybe let's revisit, and that was, do the insecticidal soaps kill beneficials?
Yes. All pesticides, even eco-friendlies, are designed to kill insects. So insecticidal soap, of course, is going to be more narrow spectrum. It's just going to kill soft-bodied insects. So it will, if we've got ladybug larvae present, it'll kill the ladybug larva. If we've got adult lady beetles, it will not harm the adult lady beetles, because the adult lady beetles have a hard shell and the larva as a soft body.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So one really interesting question that I thought was great was, how active are good bugs in the fall and the winter?
So typically the good bugs are going to be less active when our pest insects are less active. So, here through October, we still have very nice warm weather. We will have beautiful days and we're still harvesting tomatoes. A lot of us, in fact, sometimes we have to actually remove the tomatoes when they're still producing just because we're tired of them. The good bugs are going to actively be hunting the pests that they like to eat. So when those pests are, starting to hibernate for the winter, so will our beneficials.
Good. Okay. So I think you can answer this one for sure. A lady wanted to know, what are the fruit fly type bugs that are hovering over her marigolds and lettuce?
Oh, I'm sure that's the hoverfly. It could also be the parasitic wasps. So absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, so we have gotten just many, many accolades that this was great and informative, and people really enjoyed it, which is really great. Oh, I had one last question. This is a fun one. Somebody wants to know what the difference is between a worm and a slug.
Oh, wow.
Gosh,
yeah. How do I answer that? A slug is like a snail, right? And a worm is going to be like an earthworm or a night crawler, those types of things. So I'm not sure if I really answered that very scientifically. But yeah, a slug is, slugs and snails, they cruise around when it's cool and wet. They don't like the sun. And worms, earthworms, red wigglers and such, are going to be in the soil, and they are helping us decompose organic matter, whereas the slugs and snails are eating our plants.
Exactly. It's almost like one's above and one's below, that the worms will aerate, a snail won't aerate the soil.
Yeah.
Okay, so another comment, I have planted fennel, celery, and citrus and have a wonderful population of swallowtail butterflies. When am I safe to prune these items back without compromising the butterfly habitat?
Oh, that's a really good question. So what I would invite you to do is to do an internet search what the eggs look like, because butterflies will lay their eggs individually. They're typically not in clusters. And if they are, it's usually maybe just 2, maybe 3. and they look like tiny little glass beads, like a miniature microscopic minuscule like Chihuly art piece. They're remarkable. So I have pruned plants before and noticed the butterfly eggs afterwards. So what I would invite you to do is to just notice when if there's any butterfly eggs or caterpillars. Then once you know that there aren't, you can prune your plants. Typically, you're going to prune them at the end of their season. So after they've flowered and when they've gone to seed. For citrus, typically we're pruning citrus at the end of the summer, where we can time it to be about 4 to 6 weeks before our first frost, because we want to have any of that new growth that is stimulated, that has been that has grown, to be hardened off before a frost. You can also, well, Joni, what do you think? I mean, sometimes we can prune our citrus in the late winter, early
Right.
spring, but if we,
The only reason you don't want to do in late winter is they tend to be frost tender. So any of your fresh cuts are going
yeah,
to get even worse looking, like leaf liner. You wait until spring, till the temperatures at night have warmed up so that you can use, say, Captain Jack's, and then you prune the affected leaves.
yeah, yeah. So we have to just monitor and reach out to our amazing garden associates like Joni at Summer Winds. I mean, that's the thing. There's a wealth of information right here, right out our door at Summer Winds. So, and reach out to them because they'll be able to help guide you through these questions as well.
That was nice of you. I don't know how much time you have because we have several questions still coming up.
I have all the
Can you
time in
take
the world.
You can take a few more? Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to know which month is the best for nematode application?
Good question. When the soil temperatures start to warm. So around now, actually around now, because what happened, typically it's kind of March-ish, end of March, beginning of April, but we got a cold spell. So
Yeah.
I would say you could have started at the beginning of April all the way to now. This is still perfect time. And into a couple more weeks from now.
Perfect. Somebody had a nice little addition said, try planting nasturtiums around lettuce that it attracts the bugs. Another thing that maybe we don't have time to touch on a whole lot because someone asked what's eating their lettuce. And many times, I think, I don't know if we talked about it or you mentioned it, that it's something besides the pest is like on 4 legs.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very difficult. If you have any suggestions how to keep the squirrels and the rats and everything out of the soft lettuces, things like that, out of your vegetable garden.
Yeah, that's going to be actually our next program on May 8th. If you can join us on May 8th, we're going to talk about pest management around the garden, how we manage pests and diseases for our vegetables, for our flowers, with a less toxic approach.
Well, that was a perfect segue.
Yeah.
Okay, one last one. What are the small flies that are in or on the soil of my basil plants?
Well, that could be fungus gnats. So first I'd like to ask, is the basil indoors or outdoors? If it's indoors, it most likely is fungus gnats. If it's outdoors, it definitely could be fungus gnats. But what we want to do is make sure the soil is drying out before we water again. When soil stays really wet, not only is it stressful for the plant, it also attracts fungus gnats. And then the larvae is in the soil, and that's and then they'll emerge as an adult. So working with the beneficial nematodes is a great way to break that life cycle.
I think also you brought up another good segue, that the Water Wise seminar that's coming up, how many things can be alleviated or avoided by proper watering this time of year when we see so much mildew and activity like that and fungus, is because we're watering as if our evenings are warm and the evenings are still cool. And so these plants are not airing out or drying out. And it encourages some of these funguses and these mildews to just go crazy. So I think, and also properly watering them, which I believe you're going to cover in the third seminar. So it looks like, when should my dahlia bulb peek through the soil? I planted them.
Oh, wow.
Well, we can help.
Yeah, I mean,
pretty soon. How about pretty soon?
yeah, I mean, some of mine have started, some haven't, and I got even so anxious about it that I had to move the soil away to see, is there any activity? And I saw, a little, so yeah, it's happening. It's happening.
Perfect. I think when in doubt, let nature take its course is probably a really good adage. I think that's about all the questions we have. If you would like to wrap it up, we'd like to thank all of you. Also to mention, I actually did walk through the nursery, the Campbell location. 3/4 of the flowers for the good bugs we have in stock. We do have cilantro and parsley, which I personally bought yesterday to let go to seed. And redworms, unfortunately, like many of the nurseries in the Bay Area, there is a little gap in ladybugs. So we will not be getting them until the middle of May, but we will carry them as long as we can. So I will turn it back to Suzanne, but to thank you all so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Please, more questions might come up, so don't hesitate to reach out to the amazing associates at Summer Winds. You can also feel free to email me. But thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you on our next programs coming up, and we really hope that you enjoy the handouts that we've provided you. Have a super great day and have fun getting out in your garden to, looking for bugs. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.